Welcome to Capitol Catch-Up, the podcast that brings you a clear look at what's happening on Capitol Hill. I'm Victor.
And I'm Lenny. Today we're unpacking a slate of House bills that were introduced this month, a couple of Senate actions, and the recent entries in the congressional record. We'll explain what each measure does, why it matters, and how it could affect everyday Americans.
Let's start with the bill that's generating a lot of headlines. House Resolution 7981, the Stop Secret Counseling of Students Act. Introduced on March 18th, it would bar public elementary and secondary schools from using federal dollars for any counseling, therapy, or guidance that deals with gender identity for students under 18. It also would prohibit schools from helping students create a gender support or social transition plan, and from encouraging them to keep their gender identity hidden from parents.
The core of the debate is parental involvement versus student privacy. Supporters say parents have a constitutional right to be involved in major decisions about their children's upbringing, especially on topics they consider sensitive. Opponents argue that restricting these services could leave vulnerable youth without needed mental health support, potentially increasing risks of depression or suicide. Historically, school counseling has been funded under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and this bill would carve out a new exclusion.
If the bill passes the House, it would still need to clear the Senate and then be signed by the President. That's the standard bicameral process. A bill is introduced, referred to a committee, possibly marked up, then reported to the full chamber for a vote. In this case, the committee stage will be crucial because Education and Health committees will weigh testimony from parents, advocacy groups, and mental health professionals.
Moving on, House Resolution 7982, the Protect World Cup Attendees Act, also introduced on March 18th, targets a very specific time frame, June 11th to July 19th, 2026, when the World Cup will be held in the United States. It would restrict the use of Homeland Security grant funds for civil immigration enforcement during that period, unless an exigent circumstance, like an imminent threat to life or national security, is present.
The idea is to keep the tournament environment welcoming and free from the tension that can arise when local immigration enforcement is perceived as aggressive. Similar measures were taken during the 1994 World Cup when cities adopted safe zones to encourage tourism. For everyday Americans, the bill could mean that local law enforcement agencies receiving federal grants would have to pause certain immigration checks, potentially affecting undocumented residents in those areas.
Next, we have a cluster of legislation focused on foster youth. House Resolution 7463, the Foster Youth Post-Secondary Education Access and Success Act, proposes to raise the maximum education and training voucher from $5,000 to $12,000 and give states more flexibility to reach eligible youth. It also requires states to actively inform foster youth about the program and simplify the application process.
That's a substantial increase, more than double the current cap. The voucher program, originally created under the John H. Chafee Foster Care Program, has helped thousands of former foster youth afford college. By expanding the amount and easing access, the bill could translate into higher enrollment and graduation rates for a population that historically lags behind.
House Resolution 7655, the Support for Expectant and Parenting Foster Youth Act, builds on that by linking foster youth services to the maternal, infant, and early childhood home visiting program. It would let states use existing funds to provide case management, resource coordination, and home visiting services tailored to expectant or parenting youth who have been in foster care.
The home visiting program has its roots in the 1990s, aimed at improving outcomes for low-income families. Extending it to foster youth acknowledges that teen parents in the system need the same support structures, prenatal care, parenting education, and post-birth follow-up, to break cycles of poverty.
The CONNECT Act, House Resolution 7995, updates the purpose of the John H. Chafee Foster Care Program to emphasize long-term relationships with mentors, peers, and supportive adults. It reflects research showing that stable adult connections are a key predictor of successful transitions to adulthood for foster youth.
That research dates back to the 2000s, when longitudinal studies found that mentorship reduced homelessness and unemployment among former foster youth. By codifying mentorship into the program's goals, the bill could encourage states to allocate resources for mentor recruitment and training.
Two more foster-focused bills are House Resolution 7343, the Foster Youth Workforce Opportunity Act, and House Resolution 7432, the Fostering the Future Act. The Workforce Opportunity Act amends the Social Security Act to let youth as young as 14 enroll in education and training programs, including apprenticeships, rather than waiting until they age out of foster care. The Fostering the Future Act, which has already become law, expands education and workforce training, raises the voucher amount, and adds housing support, with joint guidance from Health and Human Services and Housing and Urban Development.
Together, these measures create a more seamless pipeline, from school to vocational training to stable housing for foster youth. Historically, the foster system has been criticized for aging out youths at 21 without a safety net. These bills aim to close that gap.
Speaking of closing gaps, House Resolution 7529, the Fresh Starts for Foster Youth Act, requires states to consider legal issues, like custody or emancipation in case planning, and gives them the option to use Chafee program funds for legal services and counseling. Legal barriers often prevent foster youth from securing housing or employment, so this could be a game changer.
Shifting gears to higher education, we have two companion bills targeting student aid fraud. House Resolution 7891, the Student Aid Fraud Oversight and Accountability Act of 2026, would direct the Secretary of Education to prioritize reviews of colleges that disperse federal aid without verifying the identity of students flagged for possible fraud. House Resolution 7892, the No Aid for Ghost Students Act, requires the Secretary to use an identity fraud detection system on every FAFSA and to notify applicants when a suspicion arises, forcing additional verification before aid is released.
Identity fraud in federal student aid has been a growing problem, with estimates of billions of dollars lost each year. By tightening verification, these bills aim to protect taxpayers and ensure that aid reaches legitimate students. The procedural nuance here is that the Secretary would have to develop or adopt a detection algorithm, which could raise privacy concerns. Another balance to watch.
On the national security front, House Resolution 9070 seeks to improve immigration enforcement transparency, preserve civil rights, and increase accountability of immigration personnel. While the summary is brief, the bill likely introduces reporting requirements and oversight mechanisms, echoing past reforms after the 2018 family separation controversy.
House Resolution 9082 is a more niche but interesting measure. It prohibits Department of Defense personnel from participating in prediction markets, which are platforms where people bet on future events. The concern is that such markets could create conflicts of interest or the appearance of insider trading for military officials.
Then there's House Resolution 9076, the Postal Data Privacy Act of 2026. It would require a court order before law enforcement agencies can request a mail cover, which is a non-intrusive way to record the outward and return addresses on a piece of mail. Currently, mail covers can be obtained with a simple request. The bill would raise the standard to specific and articulable facts, linking the mail to an ongoing criminal investigation. That aligns with the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches.
House Resolution 9063 amends Title V of the United States Code to restrict federal employment to U.S. citizens or nationals. This echoes the natural-born citizen requirement for certain security-sensitive positions and could affect non-citizen permanent residents working in federal agencies.
Finally, House Resolution 9079 amends Title X to prohibit the enlistment of foreign nationals from designated adversary countries into the armed forces. This is a tightening of the existing policy that already bars certain non-citizens, reflecting heightened concerns about security and loyalty in the post-2020 geopolitical climate.
Let's not forget the Senate side of things. On May 28th, the Senate held a pro forma session with Senator Deb Fischer acting as president pro tempore and then adjourned until June 1st. The key upcoming Senate action is the nomination of Kathleen S. Lane to be a United States District Judge for the District of Montana, scheduled for a vote on June 1st. Judicial nominations move through the Senate Judiciary Committee, which holds hearings. Then the full Senate votes. Confirmation would fill a vacancy that can affect the speed of federal case processing in Montana.
The congressional record entries give us a snapshot of the procedural backdrop. The May 29th House session, recorded in Volume 172, Number 91, included routine business, the introduction of several public bills, including some on Head Start, COVID-19 vaccine mandates, and small business development, and the usual approvals of the journal and appointments. The May 28th Senate record, Volume 172, Number 90, notes the pro forma session and the upcoming judicial vote.
Putting it all together, we see a legislative focus on three themes: protecting parental rights and school funding, ensuring safety and inclusivity for major events like the World Cup, and dramatically expanding support for foster youth across education, workforce, legal, and housing domains. At the same time, there are moves to tighten oversight of student aid fraud, protect privacy and mail surveillance, and reinforce national security employment rules.
For everyday Americans, the most immediate impacts could be felt by parents of school-age children, by foster youth and their families, and by students applying for federal aid. The World Cup restrictions might affect local law enforcement budgets in host cities, while the privacy and security bills could shape how agencies handle data and personnel.
As we wrap up, here's what listeners should watch out for. The House will move these bills to committee hearings in the coming weeks, so pay attention to any testimony from advocacy groups. The Senate will consider the judicial nomination of Judge Lane, which could set a tone for upcoming confirmations. And keep an eye on the calendar for the World Cup period. Any changes to immigration enforcement could affect travel plans for fans.
That's all for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us on Capitol Catch-Up.
Stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back with the next round of congressional developments.